Good morning. Welcome to FOX40 Live, and we're walking over and sitting down as we speak. We're live here every morning from 4:30 until 10 a.m., and we've got plenty of news to cover. Before we get to that, allow us a moment to bask in the presence of a diligent and inquisitive mind, one that dedicates his days to bringing you at home the very best of what the world of weather has to offer. His ferocious forecasting skills are only matched by his dazzling wit. Allow me to introduce Dennis Shanahan.
Wow, Joe, that means so much coming from my favorite heart surgeon, crime-fighting, best-selling novelist, newsman, true Renaissance man, Joe.
Wow, Dennis.
Who happens to also be an expert in the Renaissance.
In the Renaissance, too?
Yeah.
I don't like those tights. They're a little itchy.
Well, there's that. Yeah. Just the era, not the clothing.
We've got plenty of news to cover. Before we get to that, we look to the man who rises to the top daily. Much like marshmallows and hot cocoa, the person for whom the phrase, "You can't keep a good man down," originated. Dennis?
Thank you so much, Joe. That means a lot coming from a man of whom it can be said there is not a grown-up alive who doesn't either want to be in your shoes or in your pants. Okay. It's 4:30 in the morning and we follow TMZ, all right? I'm not expecting any phone calls.
Before we get to that, let's check in with a man who always pulls the right club from his weatherman's bag. A man that, despite his lack of a hole-in-one on the course, will always be our ace. Dennis?
Well, thank you so much, Joe. And I have to say I was equally impressed during a round of golf yesterday when one of your balls landed up in a tree. You climbed that tree dressed as an eagle so as not to frighten the baby birds in the nest from which you retrieved your ball and went on to eagle that hole, Joe. It was so meta. I don't know how you did it.
I do what I can, Dennis.
Oh, that was impressive. Must have been like a par 7 or something. Hey, check it out.
Before we get to it, a man whose deductions are both driven by logic and non-taxable. A man so advanced he has already filed his tax returns for 2011, and he's expecting a nice return. Dennis?
Thank you so much, Joe. That means a lot coming from a man who is envied by the Easter Bunny because you bring joy to thousands of households every day, and you don't have to deliver one candy egg, Joe.
Oh, I appreciate that, Dennis.
By the way, I love that conversation you had with the Easter Bunny where he's like, I'll do your job and you do mine. I'll deliver the news, you deliver candy, and you're like, Easter Bunny? I love what you said. You said Easter Bunny? Not a peep.
Nice.
That was good, Joe. I like how you said
Dennis. Before we get to that, let's go across to the west where a lone man with a forecast awaits. A man described by some as regal, but never by anyone as litigious. Dennis Shanahan. Dennis?
Thank you so very much, Joe. You know I put you up on a pedestal, don't you? But then I see that it's kind of cramped on that pedestal, so I put you up in a luxury condo and I have food delivered.
Thank you, Dennis. I'm hungry.
Better than the pedestal, which is...
I love the penthouse, Dennis. Thank you.
Well, it's just on a pedestal. All right.
Before we get to that, let's check in with the only man ever to scale Mount Everest while carrying his own Sherpa, a man whose name translates into French as par excellence. Dennis?
Thank you so much, Joe. That means a lot coming from the only man TMZ will not follow around with the camera. It's not that they don't want to, Joe. It's just they respect you, they don't want to ruin your friendship, and they want you to respect them in the morning.
Thank you, Dennis. First off, we turn to a man whose name is uttered by 13% of newborns in this country as their first word. A man made famous by once subduing 64 kindergartners with his soothing voice. I was so close, Dennis.
Well, Joe, thank you. That means a lot because your golden voice makes Anderson Cooper sound like Mickey Mouse by comparison. Wow. Your domestic skills make Martha Stewart seem like one of those cat ladies on an episode of Hoarders. I like how you fold napkins.
Very nice. Thank you, Dennis.
You're welcome, Joe. And thank you.
Before we get to that, the Sultan of Sunny Days joins us from his lair on the western edges of the studio with his dashing good looks and futuristic vision of our weather this morning. Good morning, Dennis.
Good morning, Joe. Thank you so much. You really take the cake, my friend, and I love how you then slice it up and put it on little paper plates with plastic forks for all of us to enjoy.
Yummy, Dennis.
That's generous.
Before we get to that, let's check in with a man who's known not only for his weather center skills, but also his ability to bowl overhand. A man who would gladly turn an alligator found in your backyard into a nice set of luggage for you. Dennis?
Thank you, Joe. That means a lot coming from a man so influential that when you opened your one-man show in Detroit, you booed the audience out the theater, and they liked it.
Nice. All right. Before we get to that, we cast our gaze westward to a man of adventure, a man of leisure. If there were a human equivalent to infinite wisdom in the Weather Center, I suspect it would look a lot like Dennis Shanahan. Dennis?
Well, thank you, Joe. That is high praise coming from the visionary who predicted the rise and fall of MySpace long before Al Gore ever invented the internet. The man who also foresaw the success of Facebook when Mark Zuckerberg was a mere zygote.
Did pretty well with that. Thank you, Dennis.
Yeah, you inspired, Joe. I almost lost it for a second. I had to think.
Very nice.
All right, go ahead and...
Before we get to that, let's check in with the one person who knows how many licks it takes to get to the center of a Tootsie Pop, a man whose magnetism has shifted the axis of the Earth even this morning. Dennis?
617 licks, Joe, if you're doing it right. But that means a lot coming from a man whose summer concert tour sold out so fast it crashed the ticketing system, a man who can pole vault and text at the same time. Joe, you impress.